Welcome back. Welcome in. It's Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com. It's a Paramount podcast. I am Mike Casazza, joined here Monday morning by Chris Anderson to go over the Q&A. Really simple. Subscribers ask questions. Chris and I fake it till we make it on the answers here. Going to be a couple of those before we're over here probably today. Um, Man, Chris, not a whole lot has changed. West Virginia, the ball bounces up on Saturday. Important game, at least relative to the standings. And if you're looking at, I don't know, top six finishes and contract extensions for your head coach, BYU at home on Tuesday night. And then we dive right into spring football before the month is over. Lots of questions. And then, by the way, make room for a new sport. Baseball starts. So people are interested around that time. Seems like it's probably a good time to, again, open the mailbox, see what we have here. What do you think?
Sounds good to me. We opened up on the message board. Had you guys asked the questions, had you guys also upvote or not the questions? And that is how we determine what we're going to answer and when. There were a total of 12 questions that received multiple upvotes out of the thread. So what we're going to do is we're going to answer 10 of them here on the podcast. We'll answer two of them in 3-minute videos, and the rest I will answer in written form on Tuesday. Mike, you ready to rock?
Yes.
Number one, the most upvoted question. B. Sprad, congratulations.
Mm.
Is Rich Rod's first recruiting class going to be better than those of Neil Brown? What are your thoughts on what you are hearing from recruits so far?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I guess I'll hop in here and take this. We'll, we'll find
I'll
out.
come
I
up.
mean,
Okay.
it's still very early, and so much of this has to deal with what these guys actually get ranked. But I think this coaching staff has already identified some of the guys that they really, really like. Again, I put up on the message board last week, hey, here are some very early names to know for 2026. And that is, let's call it informed information, if you will. Those are players you need to keep an eye on, especially early in this process, especially during the spring. But take, for instance, Hewley, the Gyron Hewley,
Mhm.
the quote unquote athlete from Cardinal Newman down in West Palm Beach, Florida. He's an 88 rated athlete, which is very good, extremely good. Top 20, top number 28 in the country as far as an athlete is concerned. West Virginia views him as one of the very best quarterbacks in the entire country, which makes sense given Rich Rodriguez's offense and the style that he likes to run. So there's going to be some tweaks like that because, I mean, even if you go back and look at Rich Rod's recruiting classes from his early days, a lot of guys that were like, hey, that they're not going to be ranked very high because they're small, because they don't really fit a certain position, whatever, they at white, etc. So on. We don't want to go into too many of those things, but I think there's going to be some of that. So I wonder if like the actual ranking will be very high, but I do know they're getting in on some guys early, and there's excitement there. Like, it's funny because he can, despite the fact that it has been what, 17 years, 18 years since he was last at West Virginia and last had that success. Now, granted, he's been other places, he's had other success elsewhere. He's done well at Jacksonville State, but having success at Jacksonville State is not going to, you know, draw a bunch of attention from top rated recruits. But it's still working, going, hey, check out this from 2005. Check out Pat White. Check out Steve Slayton. Look at these BCS Bowl wins. Not just appearances, wins. Check this out. And recruits, I thought we would reach a point where it was too far ago that it wouldn't really register with recruits.
Mhm.
But they do seem to be kind of latching on what's being pitched, and even even when the coaches are like, hey, look what happened, 20 years ago, how much success we had here. We're going to do it again.
So obviously you can't really answer this question yet. You can be hopeful, optimistic, and that's obviously a good sign as well. Just the nature of the question, the presence of the question indicates to me that there is like a blind spot or a soft spot that Neil Brown didn't see and didn't manage. And maybe he could see it, but couldn't manage it well enough. The question proposes that Rodriguez does see it, can avoid it, will manage it, that there's going to be something better because a problem, be it the staff, the cloud over the staff's head, whatever from the past, is out of the way, and something here is new. Do you see that? is there a blind spot or a soft spot that either hindered Brown or will no longer hinder West Virginia, no matter who the coach is, but that Rodriguez and his staff, they can attack that, they can work around it and unlock something that wasn't there. If we're talking about the best class in 7 years, how do we get there?
No, I don't know if he's really doing anything different than Neil Brown. I think it's just one, new is always better. I can't remember what TV show where some guy said something about that, but that's wildly true when it comes to recruiting. That first year when there's a new coach, no, pretty much no matter what, especially if the previous coach was fired because, if a previous coach leaves because they went, 40-4 over 4 years and left to go get another job, that's different. But if a coach is fired because they didn't live up to expectations, you bring in a new coach, it doesn't matter who that coach is. There's going to be an initial bump. There just is, period. End of story. Um, to your question about is it different? Is Rich Rodriguez attacking this in a different way? I did feel a more of a sense of urgency on the transfer side of things. Now, obviously, and we've talked about it plenty of times, that Neil Brown, especially in the early years, really lacked and their staff on, I don't know what if it was a decision not to recruit the transfer portal as hard as they probably should have. Now they made some adjustments later in his tenure at West Virginia, but they started out not slow, and that set them back. I think Rich Rodriguez hit the ground running and said, "Screw it, we are." I mean, we've already they're over the limit right now. They are planned to be over the limit for the fall, and so I do think if you ask me, hey, there has to be something. What is it? It has to be one thing that's different. Really, it might be this. I mean, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say hard edge approach. It's not hard. It's almost cutthroat of like, we're going to bring in 140 guys and we have to be to 105 by the time we get to the fall. Figure it out. Um, for those that have seen, the Dark Knight movies, like when the Joker breaks the pool cue and tosses it down and says, two guys fight and I got one room for one more in my crew. This is almost what it feels like right now. And I don't want to say it all at times during Neil Brown's tenure, again, that we're getting into this kind of cliche nice guy stuff, but I did feel like he didn't want to shove too many people out the door just because maybe they were fringe contributors. While it does seem like maybe this coaching staff is like, hey, you're either the man, going to be the man, or you're out. And that seems to be the approach right now.
A really compelling topic there. I just to briefly put a bow on it, I wonder if through his time in office here, Brown and his staff realized there were things they could not or should not do. It wouldn't work and it wasn't worth pursuing and perhaps wasting time and resources. You get someone else in now who's got a much stronger and broader net beneath him, carte blanche, if you will, and doesn't know what he doesn't know. Could work, might not work, definitely worth trying. And I wonder if you do see some of those tactics. Like, we don't know right now. Let's see if it works because maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And things have changed so much in recruiting and roster building that what maybe didn't work 2, 3 years ago, that was a fact. Maybe it's fiction now. So it doesn't hurt to get new eyes and so many new eyes on the problem.
In an
Good
effort to
start
kind
there.
of stick with the same sport, I'm going to skip past a couple because again, there were a couple basketball questions that got upvoted a lot, and we're going to circle back to basketball in a minute. So let's kind of stick with football while we're on it. SA year 704. With the transfer portal and spring ball timing, can or should Rich Rodriguez run the practices in a way that doesn't make it clear to the team the ones versus the twos versus the threes in order to prevent mass exodus after the spring game? Or does it even matter? How many of the current roster would the staff hope to be here come fall?
Yeah. Uh, I think you're going to see really competitive spring football to weed people out because there are people on this roster right now who aren't going to be here, and we know it. And there are some others that aren't going to be here, and we don't know it, and they don't know it, and the coaches don't know it yet either. More importantly, there are going to be a lot of good players on the outside who are available in that second window that they're going to want. They have to create space, so you're not gonna go like summer camp here and be nice and everybody has fun for a couple hours a day. This is going to be like transformative, I think, because a lot of transformation has to happen on the roster. I would be very surprised if they weren't very clear who goes where, who belongs, who does not fit. Which again, that does seem cutthroat, dark knightish. Also seems like the prescription too.
Yeah, I think it's best for the school. I think it's best for the football program. I even think it's best for the guys that aren't there. Like, you don't want to be that guy that's like, hey, man, we need you here. You're great. and he knows, Rich Rodriguez knows in the back of his mind, like, you are roster spot number 105 out of 105, and you'll never see the field here. Like, that kid doesn't want to be 105 out of 105. He wants to go somewhere and play, most likely. So it's best to be upfront forward with it. And I think they will be. Like you said, numbers are not going to be a problem. Like, they're just going to go out there and refill it. So it's best to make it very clear who is where and when and why, and move forward. KY's 93. Inside scoop on how spring camp was going. Lots of rumors about how hard Rich Rod is, how soft Neil Brown was. Would be interested to hear the rumor mill on how players are responding to new coaches. And I think a couple posts later, it was pointed out, like, hey, spring camp hasn't started yet. That comes at the end of the month. Winter workouts.
You know what's interesting, Chris? If you look at a lot of their social media posts for their, I forget what they're called, winter workout warriors or weight room
Yeah.
warriors, it's a lot of incumbents,
Hmm.
players who are on these soft Neil Brown teams who were used to like Club Med this time of year. I think that's, I don't know, I think that's very convenient and probably does have some element of truth to it. I don't think, I don't think Neil Brown being soft was the problem. So that struck me because you figure, wow, you get all these guys who are coming in, they're going to be hungry, desperate, and intent on making a point. They should be pushing weight. They should be the ones occupying all these lists. And it's not. It's crowded by and large by returning players, which isn't a bad thing at all. I just think that maybe this isn't going to be as difficult and as much of an awakening for so many people as you think. It's a great thing to say. And listen, it might be, but what if those guys are responding? That's really good news too. Like if they're meeting the challenge, that's fine. I mean, yeah, if you gotta physically suffer to grow or whatever, they are gonna put those guys to the ringers, and that is absolutely what I've heard. Is that like this is very much like a basic training kind of a thing. If you want to, I forget they call it tour duty, right? They kind of
Yeah.
give it that name because of the elements that are involved. I've heard it's hard, it's been difficult. You've gotten tough days for some people, but you've also had breakthroughs for a lot of people too. And before you get out in the field in spring football, you know who can handle that. So you know who can handle hard coaching, who can handle some extra drills, who you can really go hard on one day to see if you can turn a corner. I think that you're probably seeing a lot of notation there from the coaches. Hey, what do we know about this person and not the football player yet? You learn a lot about people during that stuff. Who quits, who doesn't quit, who just takes the orders and goes, who asks questions, who paces himself, who just follows the pack, all that stuff. That's really important too. And not a ton of details about it. You haven't seen hardly any footage apart from like results, so I couldn't tell you a whole lot about it. I've just heard that like it's very introductory, not friendly, right? Not like, hey, come on in, have some tea. It's, hey, this is how we do it here. This is what it's going to be like. I don't know what it was like before. I don't care what it was like before. This is the new normal. And again, I don't think that's to be surprise. That's to be a surprise or any type of discouragement either. It's the way it is.
I'm curious how much involvement there is with the new guys, because if I remember correctly, like especially in January during those winter workouts, the coaching staff, the coaching staff, what do I call it? Like coaching staff proper, like the 10 on-field coaches and Neil Brown were not involved at all with the winter workouts because they basically handed things over to Mike Joseph and his crew and said, "Go for it." Well, Mike Joseph's still there and most of his crew's still there. Now there's some other guys that came with Rich Rodriguez over here. And so I am wondering, and I haven't personally heard one way or the other, how much the coaching staff, especially now that there's 47 coaches on the roster, how much they're involved in these workouts, how much input they're giving into what the workout, like, hey, this is what we like to run at this position. So we should be focused on building this skill set. We should be focusing on our guys being this body type and so on and so forth. So I wonder how much that impact has on the workouts and the regimen and the plan, even though Mike Joseph's still technically in charge.
Two guys that I'm pretty interested in and just haven't had a chance to go over this yet. Yeah, Mike Joseph is going to be the guy in charge there, but Parker Whiteman has been with Rich Rodriguez for a long, long time, and he came over from Jacksonville State too. And someone else who's kind of an interesting name that hasn't really been mentioned a whole lot, and I don't know why, I don't know much about this person, but Chris, do you ever remember a skill development coach designated, and that's not like one of these assistant coaches that we're talking about. It's not like he's a running back coach or the assistant running back coach. Um, but I believe he's actually going to be labeled as an analyst. His name is Tane Bukowski. He is the skill development coach, Chris. What is he doing right now? And that's an interesting name too, because if you look at his resume, like he's been at some major programs in the football, weight room, practice field, all that, but he was at Jacksonville State too. So yeah, coaches are very busy this time of year, up to that recruiting deadline from last week. If you have a weight room person and a skill development person, familiar to you, maybe not to the roster, doesn't matter. What are those guys looking for? How can they get you through the winter and to the starting line of the spring? I think as we get to a chance to ask questions, how important, how helpful were those two? And in particular, what does your skill development coach do? I don't know about that. I mean, I have an idea, but I don't remember that being something in one of these coaching staffs. I'm trying to even go back to like Holgerson years too, because you know who develops skill, Chris? Your position coaches.
Right.
But this is going to be like an analyst who is a skill development coach too. That's pretty interesting to me.
Well, and technically Parker Whiteman, assistant head strength coach, but slash director of skill development for football.
Yeah.
Just to your point, and I just went back and looked as you were talking there. There was nobody with that title that in the previous regime. Like that was not a thing. It was Mike Joseph, and he had several assistant strength coaches, but he didn't. There was nobody that was called the director of skill development. I'm with you. I'm interested to see how that works and where honestly, like I mean, this is just me personally. Like, where is that on the pecking order? Because, like you said, the guy who should be developing the skills is the position coach, right? And especially when you have 47 coaches and each position has its own personal coach. But this guy's developed, I'm curious how it all works. And again, like you said, maybe that's something we get answers to once we ever, finally afforded the opportunity to have interviews or meet with everybody, which hopefully comes prior to spring football.
Yeah, I don't think that he's the guy that's putting footballs or even tennis balls into a jugs machine and playing catch up receivers after the game. That's probably your position coach
Yeah.
or your assistant position coach, or I mean, you can't even say GA anymore, but those people that do that before. But this is probably somebody who gives you, what are explosive drills for a receiver? What are some hand strength drills for a receiver so he can hold on to those contested catches? Those are the skills I think that you could do something with. And by and large, that is going to be strength and agility that you do in a weight room and not in a practice field. And I don't think that they didn't have skill development before, but to have a specialized in-house person or even like a department, because if one guy's the head of it and then one guy's the coach, there's some level of resource commitment there that I think is worth exploring and explaining.
Next question from BNWVU 72. With Neil Brown's name being floated for jobs, it seems he is still well thought of around the country. What do you think the primary reason is he didn't work at WVU? I think we covered the second part of that a lot, and it's a few things, right? Like, I mean, I think that's what we kind of came down to. But your thoughts on him being
Yeah,
linked
listen,
with
I don't
other
know that
jobs?
he ever had a prayer to be the Ohio State offensive coordinator.
Right.
Apologies if I played into that by sharing the hot board in the video, but like that just didn't seem like it was going to happen to me. People told me, oh, him and Ryan Day worked together. I don't think they spent a day together or crossed paths in their lives, so that doesn't make sense. And then has Tech hired an offensive coordinator yet?
I have not been following along what's going on in Blacksburg, but I can check real quick.
I don't know of any connection there. Like I just like people have I've seen this mentioned somewhere that it was mentioned on their board. I don't follow Tech coaching searches. I've known some people around this, and they're like, I have no idea where that's coming from. So that's interesting. And also, if you're Tech, I mean, you're kind of in a make or break year. Are you hiring the offensive line coach and the head coach of a West Virginia program that just got fired? That's a tough look, I think, right? I don't know. I don't know that he's going to end up as the offensive coordinator at Virginia Tech. I never thought Ohio State. I think it's very late in the game for him right now. Does not mean that he doesn't end up with a job, but it also doesn't mean he has to have a job. He's got a pretty great golden parachute, Chris. He made $122,000 on Saturday. That's pretty nice work just for getting a paycheck. And he'll get those for 77 more installments until the end of his contract. So he's not in a rush to do it right now. Hasn't put his house in the market, isn't interested in selling it. His kids are in school. He doesn't have to do it. That's probably why right now that he's not going somewhere. I think that there's probably a good chance for him to just catch his breath for a year. I wrote about this. We've talked about this, I'm sure. But man, so much happened. Um, the foundation of his profession. And during that time, he was really trying to keep his job. What if he just got a year to step back and be like, all right, how do you do this? Like, what did I miss? Again, blind spots, soft spots. How do I see them? How do I fill them? That could be really useful for him. So he can get back and he can be a real candidate for a real job and not something that just pops up because, oh, this guy's available.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of funny, kind of not funny. especially probably not to him and his family, but his time at West Virginia, you get COVID and drastic changes to every single way that you acquire and keep talent on your team.
Yeah.
All back to back to back to back. Now everybody else had to deal with that too, so it's not an excuse, but it's kind of crazy. So yeah, I kind of like the idea. Like if I was, a confidant, somebody close to him, I'd be like, hey, maybe it is a good idea to just sit back, take a year, collect that $4 million or three and a half, whatever, $3 million paycheck and relax for a year.
I mean, just think about like his career, 6 years, first 3 years. Hey, let's try to get this thing going. His last 3 years, he was trying to keep his job. And I think you're far more focused on the immediate term, the short term, than you are the long term or the big philosophical pictures of your job that are going to make you successful in the future. I mean, he had a hard time keeping pace with those, never mind catching him or passing him. And now he's got a time where he's moving much quicker and without the obstacles he's continually having to clear or run around and reroute himself. Could be good for him.
Mike, this one's from Jackson 97. We're going to go into a little miscellaneous, some baseball, and then to basketball. Jackson 97, what's your favorite Super Bowl commercial, Mike? Did you pay attention?
Oh man, the LL Cool J "Don't Call It a Comeback" for Pfizer and the cancer survivor. That was a good one. That was kind of heartwarming to watch. The
Yeah.
Dunkin' Donuts one was pretty good, I thought. I'm trying to think of other ones that made me go, ah, that was a good one. Um, those are the two that jump out in my head here. I don't know, am I missing other ones here?
No, I'm glad you mentioned the Pfizer one because that's the one I was like, usually I'm looking for the funny, but I thought that was like a really well put together and kind of heart, like you said, heartwarming one. Not big on, drug company stuff, but
Yeah.
that was a good one. Just the way they put it all together. And um, I like that one. I don't know. They don't hit me like they used to. I was actually talking with somebody this last night. There was the last time I remember watching a commercial of the Super Bowl and literally uncontrollably laughing
Mhm.
as the commercial played was, I mean, God, it's been a long time, but for those listening and watching, Mike, maybe you remember it too. It was a Bud Light commercial, and they were on an airplane, and it was a skydiving instructor talking to a customer,
Mm.
trying to get them to skydive. He's like, "Yeah, you got to jump now. It's time to jump off." And customer won't do it. He's like, "You got to do it. Would you do it for a 6 pack of Bud Light?" And holding it up, and then throws it out the door. And the customer still won't budge. And then all of a sudden, the pilot comes sprinting out from the front of the plane and jumps out after the Bud Light. And I think that was the last time I like lost it laughing in the moment. So that was a good one, but
There was a
there were some decent ones.
where do you stand on Nate Bargatze?
Mm.
Okay. Again, he's an acquired. He's a clean comic, right?
Yeah,
So he's not for everybody, which is a weird thing to say. But his commercial was kind of funny. I thought. I'm trying to think. It was a DoorDash or something. It was a derivative of DoorDash. That was pretty good because it
yeah, it
fell
was
in line with their
DoorDash.
stand up. The one that cracked me up for very different reasons, but Hellman's had the "When Harry Met Sally" commercial, right?
Yeah.
Did you happen to see your boy Dukes Mayo like with the fired shots fired on Twitter? So
No.
so
Oh,
Hellman spends, I don't know, $20 million in this commercial. Probably more than that because it's the airtime, but it's also let's get Billy Crystal and Meg
right.
Ryan. There's probably some sort of licensing you have to do to reenact this, all that stuff. There's another I think Sydney Sweeney was there at the end too. I'm sure she doesn't arrive on the set cheaply too. So there's a lot of money in that. So let's just say like a huge price tag here, 8 figures, right? Um, and it's a good commercial. Everybody gets that. Oh, okay, nostalgia. Duke's Mayo goes online, quote tweets the commercial, and says, "We don't have to fake it." Free. And
Yeah.
just think of the exposure that ad's gonna get because it gets retweeted so often, I'm sure, and liked. And oh my gosh, I can't believe that Dukes did this to Hellman's. I thought that was pretty funny too. I didn't notice that until someone pointed to me at a gathering I was at. But I thought that was a pretty good way to be on your toes if you're a marketing team or an ad team. Hey, we're sitting this one out. It doesn't mean we're going to be on the bench the whole time. And they, boy, do they spike the football there.
Yes, they did. All right, Mike. It is February 10th.
Mhm.
I believe we're gonna get some snow this week.
Oh my gosh.
So let's talk baseball. Naturally, we got a question here from Quirky Quokka. Uh, now, I'll admit I am not going to be very knowledgeable on the subject yet. Have not flipped my switch to baseball yet. Again, it's February 10th, about to get a snowstorm. But what is your starting rotation for WVU baseball to start the season?
I don't know the order yet here. All right. Well, here's what I'd like to know some more. Like Gavin Van Kempen's a big time arm. but I haven't really seen or heard him a whole lot in starting pitching circles. Like he was a valuable reliever and spot starts for midweek stuff too, but he's got tools. I remember watching him in like a high school all-star game that he was pitching in like the San Diego Padres Stadium, thinking, boy, this guy's gonna be good. And I just wonder if it's time for him. Chase Meyer, if he can continually throw strikes, his stuff is electric. That would be a guy I'd watch too. And Carson Esther just again has everything that you're looking for Sabins, and he's in that Van Kemp model. Big, strong guy, veteran now, should be able to go some innings. I wonder they don't start there. Like those are probably their three best arms. They have some other guys. Of course, they have a lot of pitchers. This non-conference portion, these midweek games throughout the season are going to be competitive. And what has happened to them when they plateaued in postseasons in the past, they run to pitching. It looked like they really tried not to do that this year too. But if it's in some order, if it's going to be Meyer, Van Kemp, and Estridge, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I just wonder what they're going to do with these guys who've been valuable, a couple times a week or weekend instead of one time a weekend. That's kind of been a thing that you've seen in the past before too. Can this guy give me 6 innings in a start, or can he give me 3 innings twice a weekend? I don't know what they'll do with that, and does that affect a guy like Van Kempen and his status? But those would be my top three picks. But there's some other guys who could be on that list for sure.
And let me ask you this. I want to try to uh, jog your brain here. Can you remember the first four pitchers? Same kind of scenario last year in February, is a week later, but two was it? I think it was like Friday, Sunday doubleheader, Monday. Some is yeah, that's what it looks like against Stetson. You remember the four starting pitchers for that game for West Virginia? Let me try you here.
I'd be lying if I told you that I was positive on this one here. Boy, that's a good question. I'm going to waste time doing this, so now tell me.
I got him. Okay, so
Yeah.
Aiden Major, Switalski, Hooper, and Estridge.
Okay.
And I don't know how Cooper, I remember kind of turned into like a long reliever, or maybe he was like that. What do they call it? Not a closer, but I guess a starter that goes in for like a couple innings and then
The
is
opener.
done for
Yeah.
the day. Um, and so I think you're going to see a lot of that. I mean, that's usually what you kind of want to do with baseball. I know college and the pros they get in there early with pitchers and catchers and work their arms up and build it up to the season. But usually at the beginning of the year, you don't want guys going 6, 7, 8, 9 innings
Right.
right off the bat. So I think it's almost going to be like this first month of, I mean, as it always is, kind of testing things out. But you're going to see guys going, "Hey, I'm starting," and they pitch 2 innings. "Hey, I'm starting," and they pitch 3 or 4, and try to figure this out because, like you said, there are a lot of arms on this team right now, and I think they still need to figure out who and when and in what order.
A guy that's pretty interesting to me, because they've had these Division II and small school guys have come in, but there's a left-handed pitcher from I want to say it's boy, where did he go to school? It was a Division II school. I'm trying to find it out. Yeah, Griffin Kern, left-handed, 6'3", 215. He pinched at Quincy University, Chris. He was 22-8, so he knows how to win games, and that's a guy that I'm not sure you put him out there the first weekend. I think there's 4 games in the first weekend though, correct?
Yes, 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 yes.
He could very easily be your fourth guy there too. So 4 guys, that's a good weekend there, and you'll get to see how they're going to shape Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday when it's BYU because they have some candidates here, which is good. It's a good place to start because where they finished has been very different the last couple of years.
All right, switching over to basketball now. We got one, two, three, four more questions to go here. Timber Pimp asks, if Tucker never got injured, do you think Javon would have emerged like he has?
Well, no, I still think he'd be a good player because his numbers were very good, and he had some enormous moments, especially in Atlantis. Are you talking a guy who's going to get this quality of shots, who's going to have the usage rate? No, because Tucker DeVries is pretty much like a point forward the way they ran that offense. I just logic. I don't. That's not a negative. I think he would have had a good season and things would have been built around it because you can't deny that this offense does something for him and with him. But I don't think he'd be as prolific for sure. Would he be the Big 12 Player of the Year? I don't think so. It doesn't mean that the team wouldn't be better or he wouldn't be as successful, although with more modest stats.
Would you like to know his stat lines from the last 5 games that Tucker DeVries played?
Sure. Are they good?
23, 5, and 5 with 4 steals,
Hmm.
31, 7, and 2 with a steal and a block, 26, 7, and 7 with 4 steals, 14, 3, and 8 with a block and a steal, 26, 5, and 3 with 2 steals. So I got with you. I just, because in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I mean, he would have been good. Probably not first team all Big 12, not in the discussion for Big 12 player of the year, but he would have been very good. But then I just go and look and I'm like, yeah, how much did his stats improve? But and those were the last 5 games um,
Hmm.
for him with Tucker DeVries in the lineup. So it's kind of wild. He's just been great all year long. It's really what it comes down to.
Don't look now, but like he's got his bounce back too. Like there are some times where he had one move on Saturday where he got ISO'd against a defender who he knew couldn't guard him, and like it appeared that Utah knew that too. And I can't remember if it was a boxing one or not, but like the whole defense started rotating. Chris, he had like three moves, like shoulder shakes and fakes, and he got an and one. But like the way he moved his body so quickly, but still moving in the straight direction, despite all the herky jerky stuff, and the way that he got off the ground and then fought through the foul and made the basket, that hadn't been there. And I know people are like down on the officiating. I don't think Small had done he had not done his customary work drawing fouls. How's that? And sometimes because he's not as good, he wasn't as quick. He wasn't as explosive off the ground. He couldn't fight through the contact. He's got that back a little bit. You've seen that a couple games in a row now, or a couple games recently, and everybody kind of loses their wind a little bit during the season. Is he found his second wind? Is he found a new gear? Boy, that'd be great news for them because there's no getting around the fact they need him to be, pedal to the metal to go far and to take everybody with him. Those are good signs. Little flashes here and there, but if he can do them more consistently, they'll be in a good spot.
Patio Toad 2021. Why so long on the decision for Tucker to have surgery? Was it something they thought would heal with rest? Were Tucker and Dad coach thinking maybe it would be worth playing through the injury, given it was the only year possible with Javon? If doctors would say yes. Mike, any insight?
Well, left shoulder this time, right shoulder before. They probably know what he can play through because he played through the right shoulder his end of his sophomore year, and then throughout his junior year. If they thought he could rehabilitate and play through it, they were going to give it a chance. So they know for sure. I think that they talked to a couple of doctors to try to figure out what was the best idea, what was possible, and what was maybe inevitable, but also when the inevitable arrived. Chris, I just think got to a point where like, is it worth squandering this season, like his year of eligibility? Is he an NBA player? Maybe. It's not a definitive yes. So come back again, try it again. And I don't know what'll happen with Jaden Stone, but now you got some pieces for a good team that you can build around who should be one of your better players again next year too. Why did it take so long? Good question. I just think that they knew and they had a good background because they had the similar injury before. What can he play through? What should it feel like? What's the timetable? And they probably went as far as they could and maybe even a little bit further before they just said, you know what, pros and cons here. Let's weigh the now versus the later. The later probably prevailed in some regard, but you can still make the decision that is the one that we thought was going to be made from the very beginning too.
Speaking of Jaden Stone, WVU kid, 1989, is Stone still on the men's basketball team?
Yeah, I don't know why this is a mystery, except that he's got something of personal nature that is not going to talk about. I have not heard a whole lot about it. What I can tell you is what I told you before. He was working out, getting closer, but then we practiced with the team in Colorado, like worked out with the team in Colorado the day of the game. Was not in uniform that day, but like he went through warm-ups and they even talked about it on TV. Chris, we haven't seen him since because something personal happened there. I don't know, but he's got family in different parts of the country. He's also got family in Australia. If he's in Kansas or North Carolina, okay, maybe he can, he's not far away. But if he had to go home to Australia for something where his immediate family is, that might be more serious. And then um, listen, there were questions as to whether he could play again. I don't know that those inherently go away with the nature of this injury. Like fell hard in practice, hit his head hard in practice. Here we are, so many months later now, and you haven't seen him. And the answer that DeVries gave this week to the question about, have you talked about coming back next year? No, we haven't had that conversation yet. You'd think you'd have that conversation with your guy, but if he's not on campus, if he's not in the country, wherever he is, he's dealing with something that's family, personal, whatever. That's maybe not the time and place to have the conversation. So a lot of obscurity here, nothing really clear, but what's the rush? They're going to have time to figure this out, and you kind of defer to this kid who's really got quite a story. Like, I mean, if you're familiar with his preseason tale and everything, where he'd been and where he came from and what he'd been through, you're rooting for him, obviously. Pretty friendly, personable guy. And for this to happen now, it just adds another complication to his life and his basketball story, but also everything he's been through and where he's been in his life too. And to navigate this injury and then something that's perhaps separate with his family or his personal life, priorities, do we need an answer? It'd be nice, but you at least got an answer this week that he's not playing this year and that the plan is for him to redshirt and ideally resume basketball again. Where? Don't know. Would you roll the dice on Jaden Stone again next year if you're West Virginia? I don't know. That's tough. Questions that'll be answered in time.
Final question, and I know it's going to be your favorite, so I saved it. RB Miller asks, is Ren in the process of or planning stages to give DeVries a new contract at the end of the season?
Ooh, I do not know that to be a yes. I'd be shocked if it's not a no. I just think you're always in your head spinning around. All right, if the phone rings and it's the agent, I have to have an answer. If I get an email saying, "Hey, can we talk about my client?" You can't be like, "Can I have a week to get back to you so I can put some thoughts together?" I think it's very similar to the short list of coaches you have. On one side of that index card is your list of coaches. On the back side of the index card is what you got to do for your coach that you have to keep them happy, to keep other people away. So I would think, yeah, internally, maybe not publicly, maybe not externally, maybe not with his circle of confidants, is he doing it? But if Rem Baker isn't thinking ahead of, all right, can I get to 3.8 million? What NIL promises can I make? What's the answer to the question about revenue sharing? Can I get him a light bed for his players in recovery? Just things like that. I think he has to think about. And don't get this confused too. Yes, if DeVries is a top six team in the Big 12 this year, he gets a 1 year contract extension with whatever the raise is annually. He gets that raise again at the back end. That doesn't mean anything. That just means, hey, here's another year. Cool. It also adds some money to West Virginia on a buyout. If someone buys DeVries out of his contract, that's functionally what that does. It doesn't make it harder for DeVries to leave. It doesn't make it better for him to be here. It doesn't answer any of the questions about facilities, financing, anything like that for the program. It doesn't talk about premium seating that might be good for income for the program, or anything like that. I think you're going to have to talk about just kind of superficial aesthetic stuff that would make the coach happy to be where he is. If he's surrounded by good stuff that he knows is going to keep people coming to the games, keep revenue coming into the program, if he knows that his athletic director has plans for NIL and for revenue sharing and the coaching staff and the support staff and the luxuries for his players, okay, that's fine. 1 more year in the contract, that doesn't do that.
Yeah. I was looking, I was trying to figure out if I got this right. I feel like this has kind of been not the standard, but if your coach has immediate success at your school, some sort of an extension is pretty standard, right? Like, I mean, even West Virginia's done that. I think Dana got an extension after 1 year, right? After the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
scored 10 touchdowns against Clemson
yeah.
in that
So
BCS
he
game.
got an extension before his second year started. I
Yep.
believe Neil Brown got an extension after his second year. That was right. It was after the COVID year that he got the extension. Is
Yeah.
that right?
He was
So
11 and 11.
um so it doesn't sound crazy. And you also, it's not just the record or the team success. You also need to like actually pay attention to how it's happening. And you can see, hey, look, this team, like you said, like they're winning games on the road in the Big 12. They're winning without one of their best players. They're winning, like they're doing things that indicate this coach knows what he's doing. And this coach put together a good staff. So I think you need to add that to your decision making. And I'm with you. This should be one of those situations where you say, hey, let's add on a year or two. Let's give you a little bit more money. We're good to go. We believe in you. Hope you trust us, and we'll always talk about it. We can always reevaluate. That's why I always laugh. I say, "Oh, it's a 4 year deal, 5 year deal." Both sides basically reevaluated after every single season, so it is what it is.
The cool dynamic here, Chris, and this is choose your own adventure for West Virginia, but they have thrown a lot of money at football. We've documented that for sure. And Rich Rodriguez could be good or bad for the dynamic in basketball. You know what I mean by that? Well, if you give all these things to basketball and to football, if you give all these things to football and your basketball program is successful, again, popular, again, doing its job in the winter months, well, then yeah, the architect of that program, the engineer of all that success, is going to expect for his program to receive supplemental resources, funding, financing, something like that, right? Help me like you helped him. Is that possible? How deep are your pockets? How many times can you run that card to the ATM? And perhaps like that can't happen. And all of a sudden, like there's not the means to do that as much as often or go as far for basketball. Maybe that frustrates your head coach. That's one side of the coin. That's the pessimistic side. The other side of the coin is that like Rich Rodriguez is the tide that lifts all the boats. Yeah, you give him money. Well, if you do it for him, you got to do it for men's basketball too. And then all of a sudden, now men's basketball gets what it needs and it's happy and it's successful. Well, now women's basketball. What about me? I'm hosting a regional this year, something like that. Let's say, right? Well, give me money. Okay, yeah, you can do that. Then Steve Sabins, he gets his automatic contract extension. But man, I'd like to have some more of this, some more of that. You gave it to football, you gave it to both basketballs. What about me? Yeah, you can do that. So like that's going to be very fun to watch right now. Yes, West Virginia has committed the money to football. Is that just the preview? Has it committed the money to athletics? We'll see. And so again, that could be a good thing. It could be something to keep an eye on too. But you definitely put your fingers on the pulse and see where this is going right now because we've never seen this before. We've seen times before where West Virginia has probably not devoted resources as equitably or as aggressively, and it's made people upset, and they've it's probably contributed to why they've left or wanted to leave before. Would that happen again? Could that happen again, or do you learn from your history and make sure you don't repeat yourself?
All right, Mike, that was the top 10 questions most upvoted, or 10 of the top 12. Again, we got two others that we'll address in 3-minute videos later in the week, Wednesday and Friday. But those were the questions you guys asked that you then also upvoted and wanted us to answer. Hopefully, we did our jobs. Extension for us? We did
Uh,
our
just
job.
just a sneak preview, Chris. I've had some contract talks, and I know the
Uh-oh.
PTO. I know the PTO is very divisive. Listen, I'm gonna walk back the unlimited PTO this year. But I have asked to have Saturdays off.
Oh, man.
So
Okay.
which one? That's just 52 days a year, Chris, right? That's it. So instead of the unlimited PTO, which I could take 52 days in a row if I wanted to, right? Just
No,
one day a week off the entire year. Do you think that'll
only
go? I don't know,
52
Chris.
days off. That's what you're going to triple your workload now if you only
Yeah,
take
but
50 days?
I
Yes.
just need Saturdays to recover. That's all. I think
There
my
you go.
bosses at the college sports website will go for that, don't you?
Yep, absolutely.
We'll find out in the future. Until then, I'm Mike Casaza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We'll talk to you then.